The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, you'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
The North Kesteven series is sponsored by Gainsborough Cycles 01427 617 752. For all your cycling needs, this is your one-stop shop located at 20 Ropery Road, Gainsborough, or online at gainsboroughcycles.com. There's a link in the description. Gainsborough Cycles, ask for Trevor Halstead. Hello folks, welcome back to North Kesteven once again, where the rain that we saw at the end of the North Kime episode yesterday is starting to disappear now, which is a good thing, and that means I can walk around this and not get myself completely wet. It's a really big village, this one, a hell of a route, let me tell you. There's a lot of walking to be done in this place. I know this place sort of fairly well. Welcome to Billinghay. Billinghay, bill-shaped island. Alright then, we march on through North Kesteven today with a village I know a little bit about. You see, once upon a younger version of myself, I came to Billinghay with a previous job. It was about 15 years ago, but I still managed to remember on this walk a lot of what I'd seen before. This is one of the larger villages in the eastern portion of North Kesteven, and it's the only one that can say it once had a secondary school. That's now disappeared, but Billinghay has continued to grow over the last couple of decades. It lies on the B1189, which shares a junction with the A153 in the village. Mentioned in the Domesday Book, Billinghay either takes its name from the Saxon word for a fishery, or more likely from the shape of the land it sits on. When Lincolnshire was still a marshy fenland, this was one of the higher parts around, protruding from the waters. Effectively, it was a gravel mound that formed an island surrounded by a marsh. After the draining of the fens in the 18th century, the area became the rich agricultural land that it is today. Water is still a prevalent feature of Billinghay. Running along the eastern end of the village is the Skirth, another once navigable waterway, but one that's caused a bit of trouble historically too. We'll explore why in this video, and we'll also talk at length about its destructive history with fire. In recent years, Billinghay has been in the news. Pop into one of the local pubs and you can buy a beverage or two which have some pretty interesting names, such as a Sama Bin Lager. Let's go. This walk around Billinghay is just one of the many you can do in this village. With a settlement of this size, it can't be underestimated just how many possible routes I could have chosen to get around it. The vast majority of the interesting stuff is at the eastern end, but the western side of the village should not be overlooked. Unfortunately, it often is. Here's one reason why it shouldn't be. This concrete water tower can be found on Sprite Lane, and it's a pretty big landmark, all told. It's comprised of a circular tank that rests on a hexagonal arrangement of 6 legs and a larger central supporting column. Historic mapping evidence of this area would indicate it was constructed in the late 1950s at the same time as the nearby housing that dominates the village's western end. That makes sense. Where there's new housing, there's always a need for water. It's a good job then that this one can hold more than 500,000 litres. Also at this end of the village is the modern fire station. Billinghay used to have a much older station at the other end of the village. It's somewhat ironic that both a fire station and a water tower are so close together here. Fire and water were responsible for 2 of the worst disasters in Billinghay's history. More on those in a bit. Next, we've got to get to the other end of the village, and to do that we're going to be using a footpath that seemingly takes us away from civilization. It will eventually take us to the sports ground, the village hall and the bowling green before feeding us back into the village on the high street. Now, even though I couldn't find a great deal about the village hall, the same couldn't be said for the sports field behind it. These pitches provide the home ground for the local football team, Billinghay Athletic. The history of Billinghay Athletic Football Club is as follows. They were founded in 1906 as a village team and quickly became quite a successful side. Soon they were members of the Boston and District Saturday Leagues, and they've remained in those leagues ever since. Although they've had a pretty rough time of late with some rather questionable results, shall we say, they remain the premier football team around here for a good few miles. They play in blue and black stripes, rather like those worn by the Italian side, Inter Milan. Okay, so now we're across the playing field and the weather is now starting to turn a lot better. A bit more like a blue sky day as it was at the beginning of this particular run back on Monday, which is a good thing. Now we're going to make our way through a housing estate now and towards one of Billinghay's most important and impressive landmarks all in one go. After traversing the road between the village hall and the high street, we find ourselves at one of Billinghay's most important landmarks. This is a wall mosaic which tells a potted history of Billinghay. It was created by a local group called the Billinghay Nibblers between 2000 and 2007. It includes some major events from the settling of the Romans who arrived in the 1st century AD through to the 17th century draining of the fens to create farmland. The latter led to valuable crops being grown in the brand new fields, and corn was then ground in the village windmills, also depicted on the mosaic. Look closely and you'll also spot the date, 1987. That's when Billinghay was twinned with Ballon in the Sarthe district of France. Another date shown is the 9th of September 1864, the date of the Great Fire of Billinghay. Now, I'm no expert, but it looks like something used to stand just here. As you can see, it doesn't stand here anymore. I reckon some kind of church or chapel or something like that. You can definitely see whatever was here is now well and truly gone. There's even a sign on the gate which is just out of shot there that says UDCS Demolition Limited. So obviously something has disappeared. Billinghay has, and has had in the past, several pubs. 2 public houses listed in White's Directory in 1856 were the Cross Keys and the Golden Cross, along with 4 beer houses. Here's another pub which was until recently a Billinghay staple. This was the Ship Inn, but it closed because of the COVID pandemic and seemingly it's never reopened again. However, not too far away from this is a pub that's definitely still in business, and it's been in the news recently as well. Okay, we've almost walked from one end of the village to the other here. We've come from the west to the east, and we're about to encounter one of Billinghay's most important landmarks. It's also one of the landmarks that's caused it problems in the past, and that would be the Skirth. Also known as the River Skirth, this runs through the village and ends at the River Witham. It gets its water supply from Digby Dam and Faraway Drain, 2 drainage channels that meet to the southwest of Billinghay. It used to be a navigable waterway at one time, Since November 2008, there's been an active campaign by the Billinghay Skirth Regeneration Society to restore navigation on it, and the project has won the support of the Inland Waterways Association, the Environment Agency, Lincolnshire County Council, and the Lincolnshire Waterways Partnership. The river was used for the carriage of both grain and coal until the 1930s, when this traffic ceased. Following the activity of the Regeneration Society, 6 narrowboats attempted to reach the village in 2009. They were able to navigate most of the way, but stopped a little short of the village due to low water levels and silting of the channel. The Skirth has also caused Billinghay and the surrounding area some issues in the past. Due to its location in the marshy fenlands, Billinghay has always been susceptible to flooding. That's just the nature of the low-lying land around here. Drainage of the fens to provide more farmland improved the position, but even today the area can flood. In 1799, indeed, flooding was so bad that hundreds of acres of crops had to be harvested from boats. Nothing, though, could rival the disastrous flood in 1877. In that year, an embankment gave way and inundated 3,000 acres of fenland to a depth of 8 feet. 300 people were made temporarily homeless, and the extent of the damage was estimated at £2,000. That was a vast sum in those days. And this sign proves that the Skirth is no stranger to flooding. Before adequate drainage, the fields around Billinghay often flooded. To reach the weekly market, farmers would strap stilts to their feet and walk in. Whilst on business, they would leave their stilts propped up against the church walls. Can you imagine that these days? Behold the Coach and Horses, a traditional Lincolnshire village pub which has had quite a storied past and an even more storied present. Built in the 1950s, or perhaps just before, the Coach and Horses was designed as a rest stop for travellers, most of whom were making their way to the coast, primarily Skegness. The pub has changed ownership multiple times, including a period where it was owned by an old school friend of the current landlord. It's been open and closed a number of times too. In 2018, it gained a sports bar with a pool table and the ability to show live sports on TV. 3 years later, a new beer garden was added with marquees and live music, and all of that does attract people to the pub. But the Coach and Horses has something else that's been pulling in the punters of late. Last year, one of the beers brewed right here at the pub went viral. Owners Luke and Catherine Mitchell set up the Mitchell Brewing Company to create their own ales. Their range includes a batch which were all named after controversial world leaders such as Kim Jong-un, Vladimir Putin, and the former Al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden. It was the latter of those three, Osama bin Lager, which sent the pub into meltdown, thanks to a viral post on social media platform X, which racked up 10 million views and crashed their shop's website twice. Their cheekily titled drinks have since attracted interest from national newspapers like the Daily Star and the Mirror, as well as the New York Post. As mentioned earlier, Billinghay used to have a pub called the Golden Cross. This is the building in question. It was built in the late 19th century and was most recently used as a free house and restaurant. Its windows contain some etched glass in the lower panes, and it's situated within the Billinghay Conservation Area. So too is the church nearby. Okay, we have arrived at the church where the stilts would have been propped up when the fields flooded by all the workers trying to get to market. Yeah, it's a nice little church, this one. I say little, that spire's quite tall. Let's have a look at it and see what it's like. St Michael's Church is a Grade 1 listed building. It's traditional in design and consists of a tower and spire, a nave, north and south aisles, a south porch and a chancel. The earliest portion of the fabric is the lower part of the tower, which is 13th century. The spire was rebuilt in 1787 and it was said to have been taken from Metheringham Hall. Internally, the tower is small, but the walls are unusually thick, giving a better effect to the small lancet window in its western face. The stone font near the south door is 15th century and was moved from its original position in front of the tower arch. It has a modern oak cover. The long chancel is 14th century and contains some old 15th century beams in the roof. During the Perpendicular period, the clerestory was added and the old line of the roof may be seen at the western end of the nave. The church registers are complete from 1627 and a silver chalice, still in use, is thought to date from 1569. Now we're outside the church hall, which was built in the 1920s to replace a previous building. In itself, as a building, it's not that important beyond being a church hall. However, the building this replaced was far more interesting. This is where the old fire station was located, indicated on the 1905 County Series Ordnance Survey map. It was from that building that the Billinghay fire engine was dispatched to deal with the Great Fire in 1864. Unfortunately, given the long distance involved to reach water, it was some time before the engine was of any use and Billinghay burned badly. It was 10 o'clock in the morning on the 9th of September 1864. It was a Friday, and there had been a long dry spell in this part of Lincolnshire over recent times. In addition, there was an almost gale-force wind blowing from the west. These elements were to add up to disaster when sparks emanating from a fire in a block chimney fell on the thatched roof of a house belonging to local wood dealer William Scott. His house was at the junction of High Street and King Street. It quickly spread to other buildings and stacks of hay in his yard. Burning straw was blown by the wind and soon reached an orchard, setting fire to buildings owned by John B. and Samuel Barks. They also set alight a thatched cottage and buildings at the corner of King Street and Middle Street, the latter of which we know today as Victoria Street. These were completely gutted. The fire spread in an easterly direction, continuing across Middle Street to Back Street, which today is West Street. Although many properties were lost, the most serious loss was suffered by Thomas Gilbert. His recently renovated stone house with its thatched roof was so badly damaged that only the walls remained. In his yard, 2 oat stacks, 2 hay stacks, 3 straw stacks, stables and outbuildings were completely destroyed. The primitive Methodist chapel opposite was also burnt down. The scale of the loss was catastrophic for a community the size of Billinghay, and at least 100 people were left homeless. They were temporarily lodged in the village schoolroom. This number is put into perspective when you consider in those days Billinghay had just 462 residents. Almost a quarter of the village had been affected by the fire, which ravaged the most densely populated areas of the village at that time. In the centre of the village now we have a cross. This is a war memorial which commemorates those lost in both World Wars. It stands on a 2-step base surmounted by a double plinth and column with a fleur-de-lis on top and surrounded by iron railings. The whole thing is made of York stone. There are 44 names on here from World War I and 7 from World War II. Here's another former pub. This was the Cross Keys, an Edwardian building which closed in 1956. It's now utilised as flats. Even though it's not a pub anymore, it still retains an attractive character. The first floor is half timbered with rendered panels, whilst the ground floor is of red brick. The roof is of rosemary tiles with gable stacks. Billinghay's first Methodist place of worship was built in 1817 and was replaced by a new chapel in King Street in 1832. In turn, that was replaced by this after it was destroyed by the fire in 1864. This chapel was built in 1869, opening on the 18th of January 1870. It's made of yellow brick and has a circular date panel in the front gable. That forms a parapet with a broad verge set on small brackets with a lunette. The 3-bay front has rounded arched windows with Venetian tracery set in 3 round arched stepped recesses which have moulded ashlar imposts. These form an attractive continuous band across the front. The central doorway, below the central window, is a modern replacement. Now in this area on the road you'll see lots of markings which tell you there's a school nearby. Well, there isn't a school here anymore, but there used to be. I'm talking of course about Sleaford School. Let's have a look at where it used to be. Next to Billinghay Primary School is the public swimming pool. Now cast your mind back to the Heckington and Metheringham episodes, both of which had similar pools. In both cases, their pools were dug by the villagers themselves, and here in Billinghay it's the same story. The pool was built in the 1970s and today it's run by a team of volunteers and a few paid workers. The pool measures 25 metres by 10, with a maximum depth of 2 metres. It has 2 slides, a sandpit, lounges, tables and gazebos. It's an outdoor facility, heated and secluded. The pool's hours vary by season and day of the week. Not far from the pool is the site of the former Sleaford High School. Sleaford was closed in phases between 2008 and 2010. It was opened in 1963 to serve several villages near Billinghay, including of course the village itself. The school didn't have an official opening ceremony. The building was a 3-storey block built by Atkins Contractors of Boston. There were 137 pupils on roll on the opening day, although the number grew to between 270 and 300 by 1967. The school used a secondary modern admission system and had capacity for 365 pupils at the time of its closure. Sleaford always struggled, even though it was the only school for miles around. In the late 1970s, Lincolnshire County Council debated proposals for comprehensivising Sleaford schools, with the possibility of consolidating 3 schools into 2 and closing Sleaford to make the plan viable. Luckily for Sleaford, in 1979 the council voted to preserve the 3 schools in Sleaford, and in the following September it increased the size of Sleaford's catchment area as part of a policy protecting the county's smaller rural schools. The issue of its small role returned again in 1986 when a study commissioned by the County Council predicted the numbers would fall by 17% by 1996. This prediction had become true by 2001, when just 183 pupils were being taught here. 2 years later, the council's education officers suggested that some schools merge to make them more economical. Sleaford had been underperforming in GCSE and A-level league tables, and so the decision was really rather easy. Despite improvements, the school continued to perform below the national average. By 2010, the school roll had fallen to 40 pupils, and Sleaford finally closed in the August. Its buildings were subsequently demolished. Now we're making our way back to the start, and in doing so we pass the cemetery and a tennis club too. Now sport is a very important thing in Billinghay. We already know about Billinghay Athletic of course, but let's not forget that bowls and tennis are available here too. You could even term the swimming pool a sporting facility, right? Well, one sport which seems to be growing in the village is curling. Yes, you heard me right. The Billinghay curlers own 2 sets of stones, the discs with which the sport is played. The Billinghay group of enthusiasts is the largest in the area, but what I want to know is, where the heck is their ice pad? Just before we leave the village, let's fill in a blank from earlier. On the mosaic we saw some windmills depicted. Billinghay had several of them, built to grind corn around the local area once the fens had been drained. Billinghay East Mill, which confusingly was sometimes known as South's Mill, was a 6-sailed affair built in around 1806. It was originally 5 stories tall, but was raised to 7 stories in the 19th century. It was in operation until 1945, when the remaining 4 sails were removed. In the 1960s, the mill was shortened in height, and the remaining 2 stories were used as a store. West Mill, or Ravel's Mill, is situated on Mill Lane. It's the one in front of the water tower. There was originally a post mill on that site, but it's thought that the building of the present mill began in around 1838. The sails turned for the first time in 1844. At various times it was worked with 3, 4 and 6 sails. There were 2 pairs of French stones and 1 of greys, with 2 other pairs that were engine driven. Then there was Hoyle's Mill, a 5-sailed windmill built in 1837 by the local millwright John Oxley. The Hoyles family operated the mill commercially until it stopped working in 1955. It was later restored and reopened to the public with a tea room and antique centre. There was a 4th mill between West Street and Victoria Street, although nobody seems to know what it was called. It was built in 1844 and operated until 1938. Today, only the derelict 2-storied stump remains. Why were there so many mills here? Well, the main reason is all down to Billinghay's location. It was an island, and therefore a relatively high place in terms of elevation. This gave it a high exposure to the wind, sweeping across the fens, making it ideal for mills. Windmills weren't the only type of mills here. To finish with, we're off to find Billinghay Sawmill, a local firm with a national reputation. Billinghay Sawmills certainly know a thing or two about wood. Their elegant flooring has set a benchmark within the industry for durability and stability. A family business run by the Lonsdales, the sawmill started in 1975, kiln drying hard woods, but 20 years ago they began machining flooring and they've not looked back since. The sawmill takes air-dried wood and then stabilises its moisture content in its drying kilns, giving them the ability to allow for the expansion and contraction of this natural product when it's installed in the modern home. The result is flooring which not only enhances a home, but also adds value to it. Their most recent investment came in 2010 when a line to produce engineered floorboards for use with underfloor heating systems was added. This £200,000 plus system includes an automatic glue liner and saw to cut birch ply, which can then be topped with a choice of hardwood. As well as hardwood flooring, Billinghay Sawmill also stock and supply internal oak doors, skirting, architrave, worktops and mouldings to cover most joinery work. And that brings us to the end of Billinghay. I promised you, did I not, an episode with a lot to talk about, and I wasn't wrong. With that one behind us, we're now heading for the River Witham again. Join me tomorrow where we'll be talking about a marina, a railway line, a well-known pumping station, and a pair of bridges which are related to Lincolnshire's second most famous castle. I'll see you there. Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.